the channel. My normal programming about this time of year would be like a rundown of all the things we've done this year, races we've gone to and what have you. And I could still kind of do that a little bit, but for various reasons it wouldn't be a very long video. So it's kind of a little bit of filler. I'm going to do a couple of programs that I thought about doing after looking back at my opinions and stuff on the 2020 Formula 1 season, and look at the video I did for what might happen in the Formula 2 season that I recorded in July. At some point I'll do the one for Formula 3 as well. Hello again, welcome back. I'm quickly recording a series on Formula 3, Formula 2 and Formula 1. Recorded and did part of the video for Formula 3 hopefully yesterday if I've got this all worked out right. Today I'm moving on to Formula 2, and the plan is I'm going to set a 10-minute timer, and hopefully I'm going to talk about everything I want to within that time, although going on my previous efforts, maybe this might not work quite so well. That didn't work too well, no. So credit to Ollie for me stealing the idea from TGSF1, me stealing the idea from him. There's the timer set on the phone, and I love how blurry that is. One day I'll learn how to use technology, but right now, it's a work in progress. Cool. Right, start at ART for the first spot, and their drivers, you've got Christianlombard, we'll start with him, and very impressive in Formula Renault a couple of years back, where he was top rookie after a very good season, ran his teammate and fellow Renault junior Max Futrell close to the championship in that one. And then last year when they were teammates together, Christian got the advantage over him in racing. So he comes in looking pretty decent. He's highly rated, highly fancied, and there's every reason to believe that he may, if not next season and the year after possibly, be looking at a Formula 1 drive, because he is definitely one of the shining lights of the Renault series. Got all the skills, a little bit inconsistent in 2020. 2021, there's every reason to think he should be in the championship fight. Moving on to his teammate, and if I like Christian, I like Marcus even more. Marcus Armstrong is a guy I've been following since he was announced for Ferrari in 2016. So we ran into him a few times, and he's a cool lad. I do like him. And obviously during that time he's won various series. He's come second a few times in various series as well. But he's someone who seems to have a lot of natural pace, and the moment he develops his consistency over a season to go with it, he's going to be rapid. As in proper championship winning rapid. I can't talk about Marcus often enough. A lot of people who follow me on Twitter or whatever else will know I tend to sort of run on about him a fair amount whenever it comes up. Who do you think will win, or who do you think will do well in these things? So yeah, people know my opinion on Marcus. People still do know my opinion on Marcus. 2020 is just a shocking year for him. Again, 2021, all being well, he's in with a good shot. But learning the lessons from last year and just managing to... There were times when he had pace, he was running with the people at the front, but for some reason, just it disappeared. The curse of the ART second seat seems to be alive and well still. So... we'll see how it goes when he moves to somewhere else. Moving on to Prema now. They're an interesting one because it's, again, a double Ferrari Driver Academy lineup there, where you've got Mick Schumacher and Robert Schwartzman. We'll start with Mick first. Traditionally does very well on his second season and stuff. When he was in ADAC, he finished second in his second season. Then he moved to European Formula 3 and won that in his second season. So the pattern continues. Last year I thought on occasion he looked incredibly rapid, but the problem was quite often there had been an incident which wasn't all his fault earlier on in the race, which tended to lead to him being kind of further back than really his pace suggested he should have been, and he was showing great pace, but it was for about 14th, 15th place, which is not where you want to be. But he finished 12th in the championship, I think it was, which I don't think was representative of his speed. But you've got to have consistency as well, and unusually for him, it was sort of a bit backwards, because normally he builds up on the speed, but sort of semi-consistent. And this time around, he sort of had the speed, but wasn't perhaps as consistent. So we'll see if he's managed to get to grips with both this year. And what a result for him it was, fulfilling all the promise that we thought he should be taking into this season. Not necessarily the fastest person out there all the time, but just consistency, always being at the sharp end, always being in strong point scoring positions. And that was what did it for him. And fair play. You know, he deserves the title and he deserves to have moved up into Formula One. Case closed. And then his teammate, Robert Schwartzman. Robert is a massively consistent driver. Tends to sort of build up a little bit slowly, almost in seasons. When I've watched him in
the blocks quickly this year,
European Formula 3 and Toyota Racing Series, I've always sort of been left with the impression that he sort of is there at the end of the championship, but you're not entirely necessarily sure how he got there. He sort of snuck up on it. Last year was actually an exception. From the get-go, he was fast out of the gates, and he was the guy everyone else was trying to catch. And it looked like it was his for a while. I like Marcus. Marcus just wasn't as consistent. He was involved in more incidents, found himself out of place because of sometimes going out at the wrong times in qualifying, for example, whereas Robert, he did what champions should do, which was maximise every possible opportunity. And for a rookie in F2, he's going in quite a fancied situation, which you don't tend to get so much. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. But despite the fact that Prema hasn't necessarily done too well in the last few years, both Prema boys are highly fancied as people for the championship next year.
And the end result of that was that Robert didn't finish the season the strongest, perhaps, but he had more wins than any other driver in what clearly was a very, very strong field. The likelihood is that there's every reason to believe he'll go into next season as the championship favourite.
Univirtuosi, we'll have a look at them. First up, Callum Imola. Again, another Ferrari Driver Academy guy, and very nice lad from what I can work out. I think he's from Kings Lynn. Not that that should make any difference, but a guy whose reputation sort of deserted him perhaps a little bit earlier on when he got put in Euro F3 perhaps too soon. I'll have spoken to this people before. And then because he didn't win the title in his first year or whatever and didn't quite press as much as Red Bull might have wanted, they ended up dropping him. But he's a guy who can be lightning fast, but again, perhaps just not quite got the consistency required for a full-on championship push. I think when Lando Norris won the Euro F3 championship, Callum was one of his main rivals there, and in qualifying, the pair of them were properly on the level with each other. But Callum just got involved in more incidents.
And again this year, if you look at the pace, quali pace especially, Callum was the fastest guy out there. But just race consistency let him down a bit. Whether that is just, Virtuosi aren't as strong a team as Prema are, hard to tell. But that, I think it's possibly Callum's best season. Very close to being the full package. If he'd have got a drive in F1 this year, I don't think anyone would have doubted he deserved it. He's done a great job this year.
But the guy has the pace. Again, similar with Marcus, if he can just get the consistency to go with it, the potential is definitely there.
Guan Yu Zhao. It's... If you'd have told me 2 years ago that people would be talking about him in terms of going up to F1 and that they fancied him as winning the F2 title, I'd have gone, really? But last year was probably the best season I've ever seen him have. It certainly his most consistent since I think he finished second in Italian F4 going back several years now. He's just been traditionally that kind of guy where you spend half a season being nowhere and then win a race out of nowhere. He's always sort of had the potential to be quick, but just putting it all together and make it all come together has not necessarily been that easy. Dan Tickton.
Yeah, I hesitate to say it was more of a Guan Yu Zhao type season this year. Still looked to have phenomenal pace for most of the year, but just too much inconsistency, too many incidents. Found himself out of position too many times. There was lots of races where he seemed to be cutting through the field, but he was in positions he shouldn't have been to start with. So consistency. If he does next year, you'd fancy him to win it, but that'll be third season by that point, and that's the point when teams start to look away. And are Renault necessarily going to pick him up when they've got Christianlombard sitting there, or they've got Oscar Piastri who's now coming up? So he's obviously got a lot of backing from China and what have you, but it's really interesting to see whether his sort of stock has slipped a bit after this year.
Dam's very highly controversial figure. Depends which Dan turns up. If he is as quick as we think he should be, then he's in with a shot at the title. If his brain runs away from him or he forgets to engage it and he just gets carried away with other stuff, he's going to end up looking a bit unpopular.
Got to feel a bit sorry for Dan Tickton, because the problem is he has a reputation. And if you have a reputation, people will jump on it. It's the Pastor Maldonado thing, whereby whether a crash was his fault or not, because it was him, he got blamed for it. There was no other driver whose radio you heard played as often as Dan Tickton's, because it was almost like the producer was waiting for him to come out with some comment or other that they could blast to the world because it was Dan. Yeah, he made some comments which are a little bit on the mark, which were kind of questionable at times in the heat of the moment. He also made some great comments regarding hoping drivers were okay and whatever else. But there was no driver on F2 grid that got broadcast as much as he did. And I kind of felt like they were picking on him a little bit. But the problem is, when you have a reputation, that's kind of what you end up with.
No point talking about his teammate. Jack Aitken at Campos. Really do have a lot of time for Jack.
Oh God, that's harsh. I don't mean to be... that's horribly disrespectful to Sean Galal. I should point out, as I said, I had that 10-minute timer thing running, so I was very conscious of I've got to save time. I can't talk about everyone at length. Sean Galal, from what I can work out, is actually a great guy. And as a racing driver, he's okay. But he's not in danger of winning championships. He's unlikely to ever win races. It's got to be a pretty freak result for him to get on a podium, you know. But, you know, we have his autograph, and he's a decent person from what I can work out. So it's nothing personal or bad or offensive meant towards Sean Galal. And of course, then when he had his injury, Yuri came in, and it's a sort of like, finally he gets his chance. But it's the middle of the season, he's not done testing. And towards the end of it, just as before he ended up leaving the series again, we started to see what Yuri was really capable of. It's just a shame he couldn't be in that car all year. But that's kind of unfortunately how it is.
Aitken, but I'm running out of time, otherwise I would spend more time talking about Jack. But he's a nice lad. I think at Campos, though, he's not really in much of a shot at the title, unfortunately.
Word about Campos was that High Tech, when they came in, stole one of Campos's better engineers, which would seem to have had something of a knock-on effect on their competitiveness. So Jack was very unlikely to ever
repeat his performance from the previous year. You know, Campos are a proper little race team, but they're not a well-funded proper race team, and they're just not able to compete with the guys at the front in F2. Similar with Louis Delatraz at Charoux. Delatraz is a guy who's clearly talented, but I coined kind of similar situation with Jack Aitken, really. The phrase Louis Delatraz like last year because it really didn't go his way at all. Jehanda Ravala and Yuki Snowden at Carlin. Both Red Bull Juniors, but both there, I feel, for more political reasons. That aged well. They're talented, but neither of them have necessarily shown title-winning credentials, I don't feel. Right, now let's put this in perspective. You know, I didn't see Yuki Tsunoda's Japanese F4 championship. What I knew about him was that in F3 he had looked marginal. What I forgot was he was racing for Genza, and then what I saw about him at the start of the 2020 year was him going to the Toyota Racing Series where he was underwhelming. So his performance in F2 really caught me out. Fair play to him. Nobuharu Matsushita, I mean, we're getting into MP Motorsport now, and I mentioned yesterday about MP is I love them as a team, same as I do with Campos, but they're not a team which is ever looks in danger of winning a title. Nobuharu Matsushita, I sort of feel like... So typically I say that an MP have their best season ever. He's not there because he's expecting to end up in Formula 1 or to go on. He's there because he wants to be racing in Formula 2, which is a great thing to be. But, I mean, Felipe Drugovich, his teammate, I'm actually more interested in. European Formula 3 Open, get the name right eventually. He absolutely dominated that a couple of years ago. Class of the field, admittedly, it wasn't the strongest field. But, you know, absolutely tore it apart. And when he was signed for Carlin last year, I was quite excited about that in F3. But Carlin just, for whatever reason, they did not get up on top of the car. So a lot of people feel like Felipe Drugovich shouldn't really be in Formula 2. But as he said, the thing is, and this is the bit where a lot of the rookies, it's going to play to them a little bit. They're changing the wheel sizes this year. So if you're going in as a rookie, you're not going to be as disadvantaged as you would have been otherwise. And if he waits another year, he's going to lose some of the impetus of being there when the new wheels come in. So it actually serves him better to be there now and run around for a year than going in next year when he won't have the same data or the same knowledge of the car, which I kind of understand. I can get on board with that. Happy to say I got that one right. Yes, Felipe justified it absolutely. Well done, that man. Markelov is an absolute legend at that level. You know, anyone who just didn't work out for him this year for whatever reason, whether it was the team, whether it was new wheel sizes and wheel tyres, so perhaps his previous knowledge kind of worked against him a little bit, I don't know. But the Markelov we saw this year is not the Markelov we're used to seeing. Goes into Formula 1, having raced in F2, so you know you've been in a battle and you're blooded when you've gone wheel to wheel with Artem. But I can't see him progressing to Formula 1. I don't imagine him being a title threat, but top 3 or 4 maybe, but he's in BWT. HWA Race Labs along with Giuliano Alessi, and last year they were as Arden, they weren't really setting the front of the field light, which actually isn't fair, of course, because Anton Hubert raced for them and he had 2 wins and was like top. Yeah, worked that one out really well, didn't I? Rookie of something at one point, but I can't see the old reverse grid win maybe in the charge through, very exciting charge through the field, and everyone loves seeing Artem race. Giuliano, I'm sure there, but we didn't, which is odd. There is a good racer in him somewhere, but his qualifying isn't good enough. And quickly, just the high-tech guys at the back. So, Giuliano Alessi, I genuinely think if he was at a team like Prima, and if he could sort out his qualifying, we'd see a different driver. But budget isn't there. There is other things, aren't there? I don't think he's necessarily doing as much, say, testing as maybe some of the other people are. And I think that's kind of hurt him a bit. He spent too long at Trident, basically, when Trident haven't been... For a guy in the Ferrari Driver Academy, he's never been in a top team. I mean, Trident in F3 or GP3 as it was when he was in it were decent, but they weren't ART. They're not Prima, and that's kind of hurt his career and how people see him. Because when he used to be there on a Sunday in the reverse grid races, he was winning lots of races, so he can clearly race, but just one lap pace is an issue. I think if we saw Giuliano in endurance racing, he could do quite well in that.
That because I like High-Tech, they're a good team. Nikko Tomaszpan.
Yeah, let's see how well this one does.
I think he's had one good season in his entire racing career, and he needs to vastly improve in Formula 2 to have any chance of getting into Formula 1.
And annoyingly, he did. It would have been so much easier if he'd have just stayed whatever. But his dad has spent a lot of money on him going testing F1 and F2 machinery and whatever else they can find for him to do, for him to improve as a racing driver. And the problem is that hasn't done anything to help his temperament or his ideas of what's socially acceptable. And I'm going to stop right there because that's an entirely different video.
Luca Giotto, I would have every day over Nikko Tomaszpan, but I don't know how it stands now, but originally he was going to miss races because of his commitments to GT.
I think with Luca it was a case of his preparation going into this season was non-existent. He wasn't sure whether he was going to be racing GT, racing F2. The thing is, all the money that was coming into High-Tech, and this is going to sound cynical, was all coming from the other side of the garage, so was the equipment and stuff equal? Who knows? But, yeah.
But obviously with everything that's happened with COVID and all the calendars being up in the air, I don't know how much that's going to affect it now. So anyway, looking at that, pick one. And I should all be able to say, yes, I think it's going to be this guy, and I'd love to say it's Marcus, and of course I'm going to go and say I want Marcus to win. But quite...
Yeah. So that went well then. My kiss of death on drivers' seasons is so far going very, very well.
Frankly, it could be any one of about 8 drivers, and I kind of like all of them. So I'm going to say Marcus. Put comments down and thing below as to who you might think it might be. And thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.
So yeah, that went well. So firstly, apologise to Marcus Armstrong for completely apparently sabotaging his career. His season anyway. I say hopefully he'll have still a season next year. Have a chat in the comments and what have you yourselves about what you think and my terrible ideas and who might win it. So some of my logic and some of my suggestions were quite good, others not so much. But anyway, I've enjoyed watching through that, even if it was a little bit painful in places. Hopefully you have too, and thank you for watching, and bye bye.